Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're located in the world. My name is Kayla Ring. I am the Director of Graduate Affairs here at the College of Communication at Boston University. Today, we are going to be holding a brief presentation regarding our PhD program in Emerging Media Studies. We're joined by both faculty of the program, our department or division administrator, as well as current PhD students who are enrolled in the program so far. We're going to discuss the faculty, the program, logistics of the application, and then go over some of our outcomes, and as well as feature a few of our alumni who aren't on the call, but we'll talk about what students can accomplish after completing our PhD program here. But I'm going to now advance to the next slide. Just so everyone knows, we are recording today's presentation, so don't feel like you have to screenshot anything. We'll also be sharing the recording with anyone who registered for today's call, and as well as for students who aren't able to join us today. There will be ample time for questions, so feel free to pop questions into the chat, or at the end, we'll also allow time for questions if you have anything that you'd prefer to ask verbally with the professors or current students on today's call as well. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to the division director, Professor Betsy Grabe, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. So I think it's a good place to start, just introducing you to people. So yeah, because we are pretty people-oriented here. So yeah, there's a slide just giving you a little bit of information about me. Beyond being the director, I teach in the EMS program, and I do research in the area of political communication. I'm very interested in informed citizenship. What makes people informed or disinformed? So that's my general research area.
Thanks, Betsy. And then we do also will have another professor introduce himself, but do you want to talk about just the division of emerging media study and where it fits in within the college?
Sure, I can do that. So we are a division, we're not a department. And so as you can see in that little figure at the bottom of the slide, we run across the entire college, right? So we're a small group of, yeah, very active faculty, but we serve across the college. And so, yeah, a division, not a department. And there you have the list of faculty members who are part of EMS. And just to make sure you understand, the other departments that we also serve are the mass communication department, which is the largest one in the college, then also film and TV and journalism. I also just want to make sure you understand that we have affiliates beyond the core EMS faculty who are sitting in these other departments, and we call them affiliates. These are faculty who are interested in what we're doing, and so they have close ties with us. And the faculty in these departments can also be an advisor to you, a mentor. You could do research with them, and so on. In addition to these internal connections, we also like to think of ourselves as a unit that has a lot of strong ties outside of the College of Communication. And we have, yeah, strong ties in computer science, programming, business, social media marketing, yeah, and again, business. So those are the key, not the only, but though there are existing strong connections with those units outside of the College of Communication.
Thank you. We're also joined today by Professor Chris Wells. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself and the area of research you also focus in?
Sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, as you can see on the slide, I'm an associate professor in the division, and my tenure home happens to be in journalism, so that's my linkage to the other departments in the college. My focus area is also political communication, happens to be similar to Dr. Graves, although other faculty certainly have a wide range of interests beyond political communication. But within that area, I study public opinion. I do study a bit about how citizens are informed by news media and how social media and news media interact with one another. I've also been part recently in a big project on climate change communication, and especially analyzing mis and disinformation about the climate crisis and climate science as it has been portrayed in social media and also news media advertising. So that's one of the areas I've focused on recently. And then finally, I'm one of several faculty in our division who has some degree of interaction with computational methods. Mine, I guess you would say, aren't as deep as a couple of other faculty, but I've made a lot of connections with the Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences on BU campus, which is a great resource and one that EMS has a lot of connections to, and we continue building those. So students who are interested in computational methods have a lot of resources at their disposal here in terms of working with faculty with a huge range of expertises from machine learning and artificial intelligence to text analysis to network analysis to natural language processing and lots of other things. So I'd be happy to talk to students who are interested in those areas.
Thanks, Professor Wells. We also aren't able to have all of the faculty on the call, but I'm going to have Professor Grabe as well as Professor Wells introduce their colleagues just as we move forward through the next couple of slides.
So, Dr. Kat is traveling at the moment, and I'm sure he would have been on this call. He's a very senior and incredibly accomplished researcher, and most recently, his focus is narrowing, I think, towards AI and how it affects societies at a macro level. He also, of course, teaches courses in EMS, and yeah, a very seasoned and very well-respected researcher in our field. Chris, do you want to talk about Jim Cummings?
Sure, I'll introduce Jim. So Dr. Cummings is an associate professor in the division. His area is in media psychology, as you can see there, media psychology and human-computer interaction. So Jim does a lot of experimental work. He does a lot of studies of how people interact with news media and how they are affected by them in an experimental setting. So you can see a couple of the substantive areas that he has worked on there, and he's an active user of the Communication Research Center, which is a set of resources that includes a research lab that's housed in one of our buildings.
Yeah, I might just add that Dr. Cummings is a specialist also in psychophysiology, and those measures are available. And he teaches classes about it in our lab in the building where most of us have our offices.
Should I introduce Aisha also?
Please go for it.
Okay. Dr. Lokmanoglu is an assistant professor with us who began with us this year. Though she has several years of experience as a professor at other places. She is one of our core computational methods faculty, so she's got a wide range of experience with computational methods, especially machine learning, and she's applied this in a couple of contexts, actually a variety of different contexts, some of which include mis and disinformation, as well as you can see there extremism in online discourse. So this is a very popular, hot area, unfortunately, for studies of online communication. And Aisha is doing kind of cutting edge research using computational methods, looking at these kinds of dynamics at scale. I guess should I just cover the computational ones?
But why don't you? Yes,
Okay.
because they group together well.
Great,
Yes.
great, yeah. Dr. Su is an assistant professor, also in the area of computational methods. He has a substantive focus in media audiences, so the distribution of audiences and attention across different kinds of media outlets. So not only news media outlets, but a variety of other kinds of ways of accessing information as well, such as social media. So he's used also a variety of computational methods, machine learning in a variety of different tasks, also forms of network analysis, forms of, within network analysis, community detection algorithms, this kind of tool as well. And then one of his recent studies has been looking at changes in social media platforms' privacy policies, sort of the ways in which social media platforms communicate their policies and workings to their users. And he and an international team have been using computational methods to analyze language changes in those policies over time. So the changes in ways in which social media platforms have been portraying their practices and privacy policies and content moderation policies to users.
All right. I'll talk about Dr. Donovan, who is also an assistant professor here with us. And you might be aware of her because she's very often in the news. She engages in thinking deeply and widely about misinformation in on social media specifically. She's very much focused on the online environment. And she takes a slightly more humanities approach to research than most of the other faculty on staff. I also just want to mention that we are in the process of hiring another faculty member, specifically in the area of media psychology. And that brings me to maybe just giving you a little summary of where our strengths are in terms of the faculty who are core to EMS. We clearly have enormous computational strength. And then I would say we also have some strength in media psychology and also a more macro sociological approach to emerging media and its social ramifications. So I think you can see through our faculty more or less what the landscape here looks like.
Thank you, Professor Graves and Professor Wells. Before we jump into the curriculum, I did also want to take a moment to introduce two of our current students who are on the call. So Max, I'm going to start with you if you're comfortable with that. Again, just introducing where you studied as a master's student, your area of research, and I'm going to throw one more question at you, why you chose to apply initially to the Emerging Media Studies program.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Max. I'm one of the 3 first-year PhD students. I did my master's. I did like a dual program. The first year was at the Lynn School of Economics, and the second year was at the University of Southern California, during which I mostly studied user identity and gender on the internet, specifically in live streaming spaces like Twitch. So I went ahead and interviewed, did all my research, and I recently submitted that paper for ICA, so I'm really excited about that. Currently, I'm working with Dr. Grabe on a couple of research projects, so those are still cooking as well. But yeah, so that's pretty much my research as it stands right now. Why I initially applied for this program. I think I was more drawn to the quantitative training that EMS provided. A lot of my undergraduate and graduate work, since I did communications since undergrad, so it's been like, I guess, 7 years. So all of that was mostly qualitative in nature. So I was really drawn to the quantitative aspects that EMS could provide. So yeah.
Thanks, Max. Alara, would you mind also introducing yourself and sharing your background as well?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura. I'm also a first-year PhD student. I did 2 masters at Merrimack College, one in communication and the other one in public affairs and administration. While I was doing those masters, my research topic was around DEI topics and how conversations in media spheres, especially in like movies and streaming, affected consumer identities. Um, but that being said, being a first year PhD student, we're learning so much from all these amazing faculty members. So my research or area of interest is really developing. I've definitely developed an interest in like looking at more of an AI aspect of all of these as well. So I'm interested in like AI policy and how that kind of fits into my previous research. But that being said, as I said, like we're learning so much that like it might develop and go other places. And I chose BU because I was already familiar with how great BU's community, like faculty, students, staff, and everyone was because I did my undergrad there. But the EMS program specifically took this new developing technology research and really integrated that to policy, which is a huge interest topic of mine. So that was pretty much why I chose EMS.
Thank you so much. So we're now going to jump into the curriculum, which are some of the classes which Max and Laura are currently enrolled in. Professor Grabe and Professor Wells, do you want to discuss kind of the structure of the curriculum and the purpose?
Sure.
Call for it.
Yeah, and I can begin with the curriculum. So in many ways, our curriculum is the pattern of the curriculum is common for communication PhD programs in the United States. So students can expect to spend their first 2 years primarily taking classes. That doesn't mean that they can't or aren't encouraged to engage in research. They certainly should, but the first 2 years, students will be pretty busy with coursework. So this slide gives an overview of the required courses that you need to take as part of the core of the Emerging Media Studies curriculum. I don't know if I should run through, well, I can mention something about all of them. So the first one, 808, is an upper level seminar. This is a pro seminar that introduces you to aspects of the field, some issues in pedagogy, those kinds of things. 831 looks at some of the core theories of emerging media studies as we look at them in our division. 847 looks at some issues in analysis and data visualization. So it gives you a little bit of that quantitative background that Max was referring to before. 855 has some similar qualities to that, only is focused on text analysis. Obviously, one of the major features of communication research, looking at texts in lots of different forms. 861 is a special topics, which I don't think is required, but is a way that students can fulfill requirements if they have. So sorry, 861 would be a course that is taught in a particular form in a particular semester without having a regular listing in the course catalog. 877, which I frequently teach, is a political communication course looking at policy and politics in emerging media environments. So it typically combines political communication with a look at policy issues related to digital media, social media regulation, for example. 888, we refer to as the doctoral collaboratory. We can talk a bit more about this one. 888 begins with an essentially a basic research methods course. It introduces students who may not have a lot of background in research methods or may have background in a very particular form of research methods. This gives them a broader overview of both a variety of qualitative and also quantitative research methods. Following that semester, these students also are actively involved in real-world research projects, working with clients, almost all from the Boston area, to execute real research projects using some of those research methods. And here the PhD students are working in collaboration with master's students. And then 889 is another course on emerging media content production. So it looks at ways in which content is produced online, the variety of different forms of content that are now circulating in emerging media, and how we analyze them. So those are the required courses, but the last bullet point is important because it can form a large part of a person's curriculum here, and these are electives. Students are required and encouraged to take electives both from within emerging media studies, but especially outside in other departments in the College of Communication, as well as beyond the College of Communication. And so our students are frequently taking a fair number of electives in other places, psychology, sociology, the business school, aspects of computer science, research methods, statistics, a whole variety of things. So as a PhD student, those electives we say as approved so that they should be approved, but it's generally not difficult to approve these. You've got a lot of choice about what sorts of electives you take. And we do hope that you work with your faculty advisor to shape taking of electives that are helpful to you for your particular research interests and what you hope to do for your dissertation. So we can go to the next slide. And then so I was just talking about the first 2 years, really, of the PhD program. Students can take courses beyond the first 2 years, but the first 2 years are really the primary time to take the courses. After that, students are really focused on their qualifying exams and then their dissertation research. So this first course number 902 that we mentioned here, directed study, this is for focusing on qualifying exams, which should take 1 semester. So students will take this once they've completed their other coursework and they're preparing for their qualifying exams, which are written exams that ascertain that the student has achieved mastery in 4 areas of competency within their work. Not all 4 areas are the same for every student, and those are developed with customization being advised by their committee. After they've completed their qualifying exams, they move ahead to dissertation research. So this is the last course number you see there, 993. After exams, they are working on their dissertation and they are taking 993 while they work on completing the dissertation, research, writing, and then dissertation defense. Altogether, students in our program are assured funding for 5 total years. It is certainly possible to finish the dissertation, finish the degree faster than that. I think most of our students have taken about 5 years in reality. It just takes time to achieve these different steps. And then the last thing I would say is that although students have finished the core of their coursework in the first 2 years, sometimes students do take an additional course mostly in their 3rd year, if there's a particular course that's really theoretically important to the work that they are doing or going to do in their dissertation, or that's really methodologically important if they want to improve their expertise, usually in an advanced research methods. That can be useful in the 3rd year as well as they prepare for their dissertation.
And we'll move on to just the program overview, most of which you've touched on, but if you want to just expand upon anything else.
Betsy, do you want to talk about that? Okay, you're muted.
How long have we been online and still talk when we're muted? The idea here is that, yeah, it's a full-time business, right, to come into the PhD program. So the course load is full-time, and that means about 12 credits, no less than that per semester. As Dr. Wells already mentioned, we do provide 5 years of funding. And it expires at the end of the spring semester in a PhD student's 5th year. Optimistically, yes, we think it can be completed in 3 years. But what I think is really wonderful about being able to fund people we admit for 5 years is it does give you that buffer to absolutely get your dissertation completed and in hand by the time you go on the job market, right? And you could go on the job market with your dissertation in progress and far along. But I think what makes you most competitive on the job market if you have it in hand. And so if your first year on the job market didn't work out very well because you're still busy with your dissertation, there is that buffer here when you have it in hand to go back onto the job market. So I think that is one of the big strengths of our program, is that we do invest deeply in the students who we admit and support them for 5 years, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of mentorship. So in return for the funding that we provide, and of course, tuition is covered as well. And you get a stipend for working about 20 hours per week in the division. And this typically involves things like serving as a research assistant to a faculty member, or to teach or be a teaching assistant in courses mostly outside of the division in the larger college. And this is important because this builds your resume in terms of teaching, right? Especially if you're interested in an academic career, where an incoming assistant professor really needs a teaching portfolio, and so the teaching opportunities as a TA or even an instructor of record is really invaluable. We don't really like for you to take on additional jobs outside, because I think that impedes your progress in the program, both academically, but also doing research outside of coursework with faculty, right? So if you take on additional jobs elsewhere, we don't think you're well positioned to make the most of the program here.
Thank you. And I'm gonna reach out to both Max and Laura right now as well to talk about perhaps the current assistantship you're pursuing as part of your funding. If you wouldn't mind just talking, Laura, I'll kick it off with you, talking about the role that you currently have on campus.
Sure, absolutely. So currently, all of the first year PhD students are teaching assistants for COM 101, which is Introduction to Communication, which is like the gateway class that every COM student has to take for undergrads. We, for that requirement, we attend lectures twice a week. We have a class component of it. It's 704, where we talk about grading or any like resources we might need. And then, it helps us prepare and gives us content for our own discussion section that we teach. And then on Fridays, either in the morning or in the afternoon, we teach a 50-minute discussion section where we go over material, introduce new material, we do group activities and administer a quiz to students, and we get like really valuable teaching experience through that.
Thank you. All right, and I think the last slide we have regarding the curriculum here is just the learning outcomes of the PhD program. If you go to the next slide. Professor Grabe or Professor Wells, do you want to touch on some of the learning outcomes of the PhD program?
Well, I think they're so well summarized there. We, of course, PhD training is to gain knowledge of the field, and not just broad knowledge, but also specialized knowledge. And on top of that, to really develop sharp research tools, how to do the research. The end goal here really is to train you for more or less two different lines of future careers. One is in industry, where you can become a very highly skilled researcher for the industry in marketing and other data analytics. And the other track is an academic career where you become a professor who teaches and who does a lot of research and also service to your discipline, our discipline. So, Chris, I'm sure you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that the skills described there are pretty accurate. I would say that the biggest things that a PhD program are really for are research, learning how to conduct research, learning how to read research, learning how to understand how research is conducted, and then secondly, communication. So it's ability to communicate that research in all of its findings and also its uncertainties, which is a big part of research. And also being able to be organized. It takes a surprising degree of management to work through a PhD program with multiple classes, multiple research projects going on. If you wind up working with research assistants of some form, undergraduates, for example, or master's students, that takes a lot of management as well. But then also the communication element. There's a lot of writing involved in all aspects of the PhD program. And so being able to write concisely and clearly and directly is a major skill that you'll learn. And then oral communication skills as well. The PhD programs, the PhD tradition has a long history of training students to think on their feet, to be able to give presentations, to be able to respond to sometimes critical feedback in an open public setting. And all of those are skills, as the last bullet point hits, that are applicable in both academia and in various kinds of, I guess, what we can call industry.
Thank you. And that kind of lends nicely exactly what Professor Grabe was referencing, that this PhD program does prepare students for both industry and academia careers following graduation. We have some of our alumni featured on the next few slides. Chris, feel free to interrupt me at any point if you want to reference any of your advisees. And you don't have to know, which I think is another great thing. Brittany, for example, I believe entered the program with the thought that she might stay in academia and then transitioned her career aspirations into looking for roles outside of that space, wanting to have her research applied in a more immediate practical matter in a industry. So currently she is the senior user experience researcher at Google and as a contract position. She's also worked with airlines previously in that capacity. And we've also listed a couple or listed out her degree graduation date as well as her dissertation topic here. But we'll go into a few other alums in the next few slides who have continued in academia following graduation. So Yan also graduated recently. She is currently an assistant professor at Renmin University in China. This program is hugely international. We have students who enroll from all over the world, which is quite exciting. Some of which who choose to stay in the United States following graduation, and some of which choose to travel abroad and expand their research internationally as well. And then we have Kate. She was actually one of the first students to graduate from our program. The Emerging Media Studies PhD program, relatively speaking, is quite new. So she graduated in 2021, and she's currently an assistant professor at the University of Vermont. And then one of our most recent alums, Alexis, she is currently a postdoc at the University of Michigan. And that was true of both as Kate, who was on the previous slide. She did a postdoc position before continuing on in her career as a professor, which is a common pathway for a lot of our PhD students to pursue postdoc positions as well. All right, and I'm going to just briefly go over the application requirements. All of this is clearly outlined as well on the College of Communication website. My team at Graduate Affairs does the initial overview of all applications that come through. All we're doing is making sure that your application is complete and that it meets all of the degree requirements. I'll drop in my office's email address as well into the chat, just so you have it. But if you have any questions specific to the application, they're best addressed by my team. One question we often get about the GRE specifically, we do require GRE scores for admission or for consideration for the PhD program as part of the application. We don't allow for any waivers of the GRE, so it's just something to take into consideration because we know that's one of the more time-consuming processes in applying to our program. But apart from that, our application is fairly traditional. We require 3 letters of recommendation. We require both your undergraduate and graduate transcripts, a resume or CV, as well as a personal statement and an academic writing sample. The academic writing sample can be from an undergraduate or graduate thesis, or it could be from a specific class, but we need to see a maximum of 30 pages. So we recommend kind of looking that over and providing us with the most compelling piece of that, either research or academic writing sample. And then for our students who are traveling or considering applying from overseas, who did not complete their undergraduate or graduate degree at an English-speaking institution, we will require English language proficiency. And then one question we often get is about the Cura Talent, which is unique to our application. This is a piece of our application that's embedded where you're going to be prompted to answer a series of video questions as well as a written response, and all of these are done within real time. You would allow for ample practice questions for both the speaking component as well as the written component. So you can test that piece out before submission. And here we're not looking for necessarily perfection. We're just looking for you to provide another candid response to the questions and allow us to glean a little bit more insight into your interests. This program, while you do a lot of independent research, you also will do some group work, and you'll also be working with master's and undergraduate students. So these questions are going to look considerably more like traditional interview questions that you might see if you're applying for a full-time position. So nothing here is going to surprise you necessarily, and there will be a lot of practice, but it's a common question we get asked. And then the application deadline to apply is coming up on January 15th, 2025. We only have fall entry to this program, so no spring admission. And then we do admit up to 3 students per year. And we do not require interviews at the time of application. The faculty may reach out to you post submission of your application when they're in the process of reviewing it. But again, if you have any specific questions about the application, my team at the Graduate Affairs Office can assist you. And if anything needs to be advanced to a professor, we'll do that. All right, and we'll go to just the next slide, just to give you a little bit of information. So as we've mentioned on this call, we do provide students with full funding for up to 5 years. That includes full tuition, scholarship, health insurance, as well as a stipend. If you have any outside funding, for example, if you're being funded by the military or by Fulbright or by a government, we do allow for that. And then we do recommend and require that you serve as a teaching fellow for at least 1 semester, because as Professor Grabe and Professor Wells mentioned, that's valuable for your future career if you choose to stay in academia. And one other feature of our program is that we're located in Boston. We are an urban campus. We're in not quite the center of the city, but still very much within the city. We're a linear campus located between, if you've ever been to Boston, Fenway Park area where the Red Sox play, down through Alston, which is a popular neighborhood for many of our students. There is on-campus housing provided by Boston University. You would be required to apply for it. It is limited. So we do see a lot of our students choose to live off campus in the greater Boston area and travel to campus by public transportation. You don't need a car in Boston, which is another advantage because there's the T, which is our subway system, as well as buses. And I want to be clear that housing is not incorporated into the full tuition, health insurance, or stipend. That would be something you would look for independently if you chose to apply and were admitted to the program. But that's often a question we get asked. So now we are going to stop sharing our screen with our presentation, and we're going to answer any questions that you have. And I think that there's one already in the chat. Or we'll start with you, and correct me if I mispronounce your name, Anusha. See your hands raised.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the chance. I wanted to ask whether this PhD program is STEM. Is it a STEM
Oh,
program?
STEM eligible for optional practical training?
Yes.
Yes, so this program is STEM eligible, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions? I'll jump in with one question that we often get asked for the faculty. Can you describe if someone needs to come into the program already having a clear idea of what their dissertation will be before applying to the program?
Dr. Wells and I might disagree about this, but I prefer not. That you have a vague sense of what you're interested in. But I think if you walk through our front door and you have your dissertation title nicely formulated, then I'm not sure we can be of a lot of help to you, right? We really do want you to immerse yourself in the program, and we hope that the program would influence you in ways, right? That we would provide you with an environment where you literally have your mind blown a few times, right? And where you open yourself up to different methods, different theories that might shape your academic identity and where you see yourself going intellectually and in terms of research. That would be my 5 cents on it.
I actually feel the same way, so I won't add anything to that.
All right, great. And since I asked that question, several students have their hands raised. Miriam, I think you were the first one with your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you so much. My question is about the methodology that you choose, if you will. In my current master's program in California State University, Sacramento, we tend to jump between quantitative methods, qualitative methods, and also rhetorical criticism. My area of study is in rhetorical criticism, but I'm also very interested in qualitative. I'm wondering, based on the presentation that you guys gave, as well as the courses that you are showcasing for the EMS program, is it heavily quantitative, or is there room for more rhetorical and qualitative based study?
I can answer that. I don't know if I would say heavily quantitative. I think I would say majority quantitative. Most of us in the department are using mostly quantitative methods, though there are some qualitative methods used. However, in the area of rhetorical criticism, I do not think that you would find as much resources within emerging media studies. Of course, they're on campus. But if you wanted that to be your core method, it might be challenging to find an advisor or even committee members within EMS with a lot of expertise in that particular area. So some qualitative methods, yes, empirical qualitative methods, yes, but the rhetorical area would be a little scarcer.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Miriam. Jack?
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. It's super, super helpful. I just wanted to ask about those sort of first 2 years where the stipend comes from the assistantships in the spring and fall. So for the summer and those first 2 years, like what are sort of smart ways to utilize that time effectively? Is that could be heavy research time? Might you assist another professor in their research? Or take on an assistantship over the summer? What do you see students doing most often?
Yeah, summers are research moments, right? Or months, I would say. That's when you really dig in and do some work, right? Because you're not distracted by coursework and other things mostly. So you'll find that the faculty are deep in research mode. And if you are working on a study outside of coursework with a faculty member, or you're involved in a study that's conducted collaboratively with other PhD students, right? That's when you really can make the progress on that. There are sometimes also courses offered in summer. If you want to pick up a course during the summer, there are courses available, but my recommendation would be to really focus on your research.
Thanks, Jack. Melissa, and then we'll jump into some of the questions in the chat.
Hi, I wanted to know, do most students coming in have a background in media studies already or a communication background, or would you say that the disciplines are varied?
I would say most have backgrounds in social science. So maybe most have a background in communication, but that's certainly not required. But we either require it or we strongly recommend that students have a master's in a social science discipline. So that can mean, sociology, political science, communication, a variety of things, but not necessarily communication.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one question in the chat. How is the supervisor selection process handled? Do students choose their own professors, or is one assigned by the college or division?
Look, when you arrive, we want you to have someone you can turn to. And so we try and match you topically, match you in terms of what you're interested in and what our faculty can offer. So we make an initial match. So when you come here, you have someone who can sit down and immediately advise you on coursework and make sure that you settle in. But that doesn't mean that is now your advisor. Of course not. As you take classes and you get to know faculty, you might find an intellectual match with another advisor. And then you formally petition to establish your committee, right? Your advisory committee who will take you through qualifying exams and the dissertation. And you have, a year or so to do that, a little more than a year, to decide who you really find that click with. And then it's absolutely your decision in the end.
All right, we do have one other question from Genevieve. If there are only 3 PhD students accepted each year, what are the classes like in the first 2 years? What do the classes look like with a small incoming class?
Sure. So most of the classes, they vary in size from sort of genuine seminar type size of 6 to 10 to sort of mid-level classes of 20 to 30. And the reason that the numbers can be that large is that a couple of the required classes are mixed with the master's students. So in that case, PhD students have a lot of interaction with master's students, and so the courses can be kind of medium-sized. But in other cases, the more special topics courses, master's students from our program and others can opt into them as electives, but they're not required for the master's students, so there tend to be fewer master's students. So I think those are I don't have the number off the top of my head, sort of how many courses fall in each of those groups, but those will be the main varieties of courses the students will see.
And I'll just add to that, often our courses draw students from elsewhere on campus as well, right? So you might actually meet some people from elsewhere in some of the EMS courses.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'm answering a couple of the questions in the chat more specific to the application. Give everyone a moment. And then while we're waiting, perhaps, Professor Wells and Professor Grabe, would you be able to provide any sort of advice you would give to someone considering not only our PhD program, but perhaps just when they're considering a PhD program more generally? Any advice you'd give to a student?
Betsy, you want to hear my advice first? Okay, so when you're choosing a PhD program, so I would think about kind of two things, sort of topical interests and methodological interests would be things that I would be thinking about. Uh, as a PhD student, you might not necessarily know a whole lot about methods yet, so that might not be an area that you can sort of decide what you want to do. And as Betsy said, it's great to have an open mind about both of those things, but you should be driven by some, I think, curiosity, some big questions that really motivate you, some things you're curious about and that you can put up with reading about for like 5 years. So that's an important thing. So once you kind of have an idea of what those things are, looking for environments that have active faculty who are writing about the topics that you're interested in, whose writing you find interesting. It's great if you have a program that doesn't only have a single person doing the thing that you're interested in, but has a sort of small cadre, 2, 3, 4 faculty that you can imagine working with. The issue with sort of applying to a place with only one person is all kinds of stuff happens. People move, people go on sabbatical. So sort of not putting all of your eggs in a single basket is kind of a good idea when it comes to that. And then the only other thing I would add would be communicate your story. In your application materials, tell folks what your big ideas are, what your curiosities are, where they came from, a little bit about your background, and then communicate to the admissions committee the sorts of people that you could see yourself working within that particular department.
I think that is very, very good advice. I can hardly add to that. I'll try. If at all possible, and I realize there are many international students on this call who would not be in a position to do this, but if you are serious about doing a PhD and you have received an offer of admission, I think it's, if at all possible, to visit the place, because you're going to spend 5 very intense years in that place, right? And so it's quite important to not just rationally see that you fit somewhere, but to feel it. It's almost like a little clicking sound that happens. They go, yes, I belong here. The way that this group of people think about pedagogy, the way they think about mentorship, the structure of the courses, sit in a class, go talk to the faculty. I feel inspired and I feel that this is a match for me. So having that sense of match, I think, is very difficult to define, but I think you'll know it when you feel it. And I'm strongly encouraging you to pursue that sense of, is this a match for me, intellectually, content-wise, but also stylistically, and how mentorship works at this place. If you're not able to come here, I think you can get a lot of the answers by just talking to people via Zoom and writing them, and yeah, checking out the Boston area in all the ways that are available. Right, you can do a lot of research to understand the place and its people.
Thank you. So I think I have answered all of the questions in the chat, and we are coming up at 11. So if you have any remaining questions, please feel free to email us at comgrad@bu.edu. That ensures that you reach our office first. And then if you have more specific questions meant for a professor or current student in the program, we'd be happy to arrange that conversation for you. But we want to thank the professors who were able to join us on this call, as well as to the division administrator, Sean Mao, who has helped us with today's presentation. Thank you very much, Sean. He also dropped his information in the chat. If you applied and were admitted to the program, you'd be working with Sean quite a bit. He's a great asset to the program and helps our PhD students as well as master's students on a day-to-day basis. But if, again, any questions, doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. We look forward to, of course, speaking with many of you in the future, and we look forward to reviewing many of your applications as well. But thank you all again, and thank you, Professor Wells and Professor Grabe.
Thank you
Bye-bye,
very much.
everyone.